that's faculty, whether that's our learning center, our Bearcat studio, we make sure that they have what they need. Perhaps the student health-wise, they're not doing well. Maybe they have a little bit of stress and anxiety. We have campus partners that are experts in those particular areas to help students navigate, to help them understand how to manage all of those things in a very, very healthy manner. And then the most important is the one that I'm sure you're interested in, is that we help students stay on track for graduation. Something that you probably have heard a lot about, will hear a lot about now and going forward over the next 4 years, is our Bearcat Promise. And part of that Bearcat Promise is to make sure that students have a degree plan in their hands. So from day one, when they come to the University of Cincinnati, students will work in partnership with their academic advisor to make sure that they have an 8-semester plan, not 1 semester, not 2 semesters, but they will have an 8-semester plan that outlines, these are the steps, these are the courses. They can plan for co-op, whatever that experience is. They'll work with their academic advisor to make sure that they have exactly what they need and that they are tracking for graduation. Financially, it works out really well for them, so they're not taking a ton of extra courses that may not count for something towards their degree. And we're just making sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do and that they understand the path that they're on. There are a few things that we don't do, and it's not that we won't or don't want to, but again, we have experts on campus that we partner with, and we tend to refer students to those offices. One of those areas are financial aid. Some of you may have questions about financial aid tonight. We will make sure that we put contact information in the chat box about our financial aid office. We want to leave it to them because we know if we happen to give out wrong information, that could really harm our students, right? That could harm you as parents and how you financially plan for your students' educational journey. So we just want to make sure that we get them in the hands of campus partners that really are knowledgeable about policies and deadlines and processes related to financial aid. The other one is housing. It's very similar. You may have questions about housing. We always refer out, get students connected for any questions that they have about housing as well. We also cannot ensure that your student is going to class or turn in assignments. Believe it or not, I've had some parents, funny story. I had a parent that at orientation asked, would somebody be calling to the student in the morning to make sure that they got ready for classes in their first year. We do not do that. This is the time for the student to take that responsibility. So we don't do that or make sure they turn in assignments. However, because we are holistic, because we do have partners across campus and we have systems and processes in place, if your student just happens to be maybe not doing as well or having missed assignments, we do have a process in place that their faculty can raise an alert and say, hey, you know, Beth didn't submit the last 4 assignments. I'm a little bit concerned. And that allows us to be proactive in communicating with the student. We also don't contact parents proactively about their academic performance, primarily because we want to make sure that the student encourage the student to talk to their parents, but also because of FERPA, which if you haven't heard about that, Casey will talk about that a little bit later. And then obviously I already talked about ensuring housing assignments and checking on students in the residence hall. Not something that we do for students, but certainly please be aware that in the case of contacting parents, if it is a situation where the parent, or I'm sorry, that the student, maybe there's harm, maybe the student is very, very ill and we need to contact, in those cases, we would be proactive in calling, but related specifically to academic performance, we do not manage that process for students. We encourage them to talk openly with their parents about what's happening. Casey, I'm gonna, did you have anything to add there at all?
No, we just have the bottom there about advisors advising and students decide. So giving as much information as we can to the student so that they can make an informed decision.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So once your student comes here, we start working with your student as early as mid to late May, early June. They get assigned their primary college advisor. They go through their advising prep sessions, and then they have a one-on-one appointment with their advisor from their specific college. Where they start to build that relationship. The advisor gets to learn what they want to do and what their goals are. Students are able to schedule that appointment via My Bearcat Network. They should have, if they've been through the virtual advising prep session, learned about and have been walked through the Bearcat, the My Bearcat Network to set up an actual advising appointment. In terms of how frequently, most of our colleges actually require first-year students to meet with them each semester. And then from there, depending on how the student is doing, I believe it becomes optional or if they're a part of a special program, but they have to meet at least once a semester or as required by their home college. There are also other layers. Some of you have students that are thinking about professional schools. Maybe they're thinking about something in healthcare. Maybe they're thinking about something in law. We have a pre-professional advising office that helps students navigate if they are thinking about applying to any type of pre-health program or law school that they're interested in. And so that is a really great team. They meet one-on-one. They have lots of workshops. They help with personal statements and prepping for interviews and things like that required for professional schools. We also have honors advising and co-op advising. So depending on if your student is in the honors college or they're prepping for co-op experience through their home college, they can get an additional layer of academic of advising as well. And then this chart here, one of the things that you may either hear by way of just your engagement as a new Bearcat family or from your student is this idea of various types of advisors. And so in addition, you may hear about your enrollment services advisor or your resident courses. They may have interactions with the faculty advisor or in the Learning Commons. I just want to make sure that we differentiate through this chart what are the responsibilities of each one of those offices and what they can handle. We all work in conjunction with each other, but obviously we have our specific areas of expertise and how we support the student, and we communicate with each other along the way. And so now I'll flip it to Casey and she'll kind of take it from here with a few additional areas of advising.
All right, so timeline of advising. If your student is an incoming Bearcat for the fall, likely they have attended a virtual advising prep session, and then that is how they get information about how to schedule with their assigned advisor. So before classes start in the fall, they will meet with an advisor over the summer. Typically that's happening virtually. So they meet with an advisor, discuss kind of their goals, figure out what classes they'll be scheduling for the fall. And that is in addition to an orientation. So the orientation is separate, that they're coming here on campus, but the advisor will meet with them over the summer to get their classes scheduled. Sometimes this can mean, you know, if they have AP scores or other things coming in, following up with the advisor a little bit later in the summer, just to clarify and make sure if they received additional credits. So this can be a process, and that's something we always remind students of, is that scheduling is always a process. So as they're coming in, if they don't get that perfect schedule when they meet with their advisor, just know that it is a process that they will continue to work on as they get to the fall. In the fall, they will meet with an advisor. Again, as Leah mentioned, some programs that is mandatory, especially for freshmen. This is typically November-ish. We do priority scheduling. So that means that seniors that are getting ready to graduate have first priority to make sure that they can get the classes they need to graduate. And then it goes down from there in terms of credit hour. So students that are just entering would be, you know, later in that priority before just open registration would be available to anyone. So November is when they would meet with that advisor to schedule spring classes. And that's also an important distinction. High school, sometimes you have a class and it's the entire year. For students coming into college, they will schedule fall classes, And then spring classes will be completely different, or maybe the second part of a series. Spring, they're going to meet again with an advisor, and they're going to schedule for either summer or fall, depending on what their path is. And so they may be meeting in March and scheduling for the next fall. So we want to make sure that students are checking in regularly, reaching out to advisors. And again, scheduling happens through My Bearcat Network. So all of our advisors are in My Bearcat Network and are available to make appointments, pretty much any time through that network. So My Bearcat Network is where they schedule and can update all of that information. Anything to add there, Leah?
I would just say, with this timeline, I would keep this in the back of your mind, because this right here is a great time to call Beth or Tom and say, hey, did you set up your appointment with your advisor? Because our students will tend to get overly involved on campus. They're excited, right? But this is a great time, based on this timeline that Casey presented, is to drop a quick text to them and say, hey, don't forget, have you set up your appointment? Because those fill up early, right? And so we want to make sure that they get in there and they're not stuck in a situation where maybe they missed, out having an earlier appointment, especially if they really have some really deep questions for their academic advisor.
Right. That's a great point, because we want to make sure that they can get in on time at a time that works for their schedule. So being proactive, and as soon as they get notification that they have an appointment of when they can register, scheduling very soon so then they can get ahead of things. So very good point, Leah. All right. Academic calendars. We wanted to bring this up to you to make sure that you are aware of the university's calendars and deadlines. These are followed, and so we want to make sure that you are aware, students are aware. The registrar's website has all of the information, and I took a screenshot here that kind of shows you what that looks like. So there are different deadlines for online registration. That's usually through the first week of classes. So it's not anytime soon, but there is a time that students will need to get further permission. There's also deadlines for things like if they are dropping a class and wanting a refund, that goes only until a certain point. After that point, it is a withdrawal. There would be no refund, and there would be a W on the transcript. So we want to make students aware of that, because sometimes they're not aware that those exist and are enforced. Also, reading days. Reading days are a day that students are supposed to kind of go further in depth with whatever their studies are. And so those are additional days that students may want to be aware of, and you as well. Anything on that one, Leah?
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing, and maybe Casey can also speak to this because she's an alum, but the exam schedule is posted early in the academic year, at the beginning of the year, and it's on the syllabus. I point this out because oftentimes families like to take vacations at the end of whatever semester, maybe in December, they're getting ready to leave. And it is without fail that we have a good handful of students that are seeking to get out of or rearrange their exam schedules. And often faculty are quite sticklers sometimes for, this has been posted, you should have given this to your family. And so I would really pay close attention to when those exams fall, when your student can check the syllabus and say, hey, when's your last exam? So that you can appropriately plan for any types of vacation or travel that you have coming up. Because typically it is very, very difficult to move that around. I'm sure that there are moments where there may be an exception, but I would say they would have to be extenuating circumstances, simply because those dates are posted well in advance.
Yes. And it goes by class. So there's a schedule. So it's not just 2 days or something. It could be any time throughout the week. So definitely checking their individual syllabus when they get that. All right. So some of the technology that you might be hearing about, and if not, we wanted to make you aware of that. We've talked a little bit about My Bearcat Network. And again, that is where students can schedule appointments with their assigned advisors. Some faculty may be in there as well, or other offices. So for example, our transfer and transition advisors are also in My Bearcat Network. So this is an easy way for students to find resources and make appointments. Catalyst, that is our official student record. This is where students register for classes. This is where their bill is posted, their official grades. So they will work in Canvas, which is listed down below, and that's where their course material is, but their official grades and grade report would be in Catalyst where they are pulling. So all of that technical information about their record is going to be in Catalyst. There's also My Graduation Plan, and that again is what Leah was talking about, a student having a full plan from the beginning to end as to how their degree is mapped out over those 8 semesters. And if your student is in co-op, we're talking 8 semesters of courses, because that can throw off in terms of that co-op in between. So we're talking courses. And then the last one there, Canvas. Canvas is if your student has used anything online for high school where they worked on a course, it's the same type of thing. You may have heard of Blackboard, some other technology. This is what we use right now, Canvas. So that's where their courses are housed. Sometimes communities also within their college, assignments are sent out. They can have this on their phone. There's a, I believe there is an app for it. So this is where all of their content is going to be housed, and they want to be checking that regularly to make sure that they are up to date on assignments, getting things turned in, and keeping up with courses. Anything, Leah? Good, okay. All right, additional services that we want to make sure that you are aware of. We know that college can be a very stressful time. It's a transition. And so as students are coming in, we want to make sure that you're aware of CAPS. So CAPS is not an advising service, but it's something that I think sometimes students are not sure where to turn. We can help and we can get them referred, but we also want to make sure that you are aware. So CAPS is counseling and psychological services. It offers counseling appointments as well as crisis support. So both the daytime number and the after hours number are the same. So if you feel that your student might need, some counseling services or any of that kind of support, make sure that they are aware of this. This is something that is used very often by students. So we have a whole office, meaning this is very normal for students to need to process this big change that they're going through. There's also additional career services available, such as the Bearcat Promise Career Studio, and that is peer-to-peer and professional career counseling. So if your student knows what they want to do, but they're not really sure how to break out into the workforce and get prepared for after college or even for internships while they're here, this is a good way for them to start to look into those opportunities. Leah talked a little bit about pre-professional advising. This is an office that can meet with students as soon as they know that they're interested. So they don't want to meet with them in their senior year. They want to meet with them as soon as they know. So that way they can start making them the best candidate for those professional schools and start working on all of those skills, extracurriculars, personal statements, and everything that they will need to actually apply for those schools. And the last one I'm a little partial to, that's our center, the Transfer and Transition Advising Center. We know that about 50 to 80% of students change their major while they're in college, at least once, sometimes even more. And that's normal. So we want to make sure that you're aware that there are services for students to come and talk with advisors if they are thinking about changing their major. And we are available throughout the school year. We have drop-ins for our current students. So that is something that if your student is thinking they're in classes, they're not quite sure if it's a good fit, there is a center that they can talk to. Good, Leah?
Actually, I just want to add one thing. I think oftentimes in my experience, I've worked with a lot of students that have been really afraid to tell their parents that they want to change their major. And I just want to normalize the fact that 75% of students change their major at least once.
Yep.
And they are going to take so many different kinds of classes and be exposed to so many different types of people and organizations that they didn't even know existed. And so they may very well get exposed to a career field, to an academic major that they find is a much better fit to their strengths, and they can still get to their end goal with a different major. And that is why the Transfer and Transition Advising Center that Casey oversees is so critical, because her office are a team of experts that can really help students think about different pathways, right? There are a lot of majors members to the same pathway or different pathways, and there's a specific major. But I think it's really important to just normalize the fact that students may change as a result of being exposed to so many different areas. That doesn't mean their pathway or their end goal has to change. It just means we're trying to position them to be most competitive and operate in their strengths.
Right. There's many discovery majors is what we call them, that students didn't even know they exist, and then they find them. So that's what we're here to do, is help them understand. There's also a tool called My Majors that is an assessment that students can take that give them 10 UC majors. So there's different things that we can do. And the whole reason we're doing this is because it's normal. It happens all the time. So that's why we have a whole office dedicated to it. So just to normalize that and to have those conversations with your students, you know, to let them know, because sometimes they think they have to have it all figured out when they're 18, and we know that it's completely normal to feel like they're not sure just yet. All right. So when we're talking about all of these advising appointments and coming in to see an advisor, we want to make sure that you know some specifics around being prepared. So when they schedule the appointment, there's a place that they can add details. If they tell us that they're coming in to talk about something specific, like a course, or what internship opportunities are there, or I'm thinking about this major or that major, we can better prepare and have a better conversation with that student. Also, as they're coming in, writing down those questions it's super important. I was meeting with a student yesterday, and he goes, I had a lot of questions, but I didn't write them down. So immediately he felt like, you know, off a little bit because he had to think about what those were. So we recommend writing those down, bringing them with the student, you know, to make sure that we answer all those questions. Any homework that they may need to do. The big one for the first advising appointment is any placement test. Math placement is especially important, especially if your student's going into a STEM field, because we have to have the proper placement score to put them in the proper class. So if we don't have any scores, then scheduling would have to be rescheduled to another date until we have that score. So making sure they do any homework that was assigned to them before that appointment. And then the last one, make reminders, be on time. If your student has a half-an-hour appointment with an advisor, that advisor may have back-to-back appointments all day. And if they show up 15, 20 minutes late, they won't be able to have that full conversation with the advisor. So making reminders, being on time, really important to make sure that the student gets that full time with the advisor. Anything else you'd add, Leah? All right. So a parent's role. We wanted to make sure that you were aware of FERPA and delegated access. So FERPA, we use a lot of acronyms in our heads. So FERPA is the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. So what it does is it gives the student in college the rights to their academic record. So that right to the student can be delegated to a parent through a process in Catalyst. So if the rights for a high school student, those were with the parent, but as soon as they come into secondary, post-secondary education, those transfer to the student. So that's where we get this student delegating access. They can delegate access to any part of the record, so financials, academics, any of that. So if you're talking with an advisor, that we may be asking, you know, if you have FERPA on file, delegated access, and we're going into the system to check that. We really encourage you to have a conversation with your student, because we want the student to have that conversation with you and make sure that they're telling you the information that we're sharing and we're not crossing that boundary. We want the student and you to talk rather than talking through the parent to the student, so to speak. So you can go in, the student can go into Catalyst, designate a delegate. The parent would then receive further instructions on how to log in, how to get that access. So it is a process. We want to make sure you're aware of that, so that if you call an office on campus and they tell you that they're not able to talk with you, that you're aware of where that comes from, that it is a federal law that we're following. So sometimes parents can get very angry with us. So we just want to make sure that you're aware that, you know, we're following policy and procedure there. Anything to add there, Leah? Yeah. And then we have some tips for you. And I think Leah wanted to talk through these. So how can you help with your student and their advising and their college experience?
Yeah, so we just have a couple here. Certainly, this is not an exhaustive list of ways, but these are some of the more common ones that I think we wanted to just highlight for you tonight. I mean, the big one is ask questions and then listen. You know, oftentimes, you know, in our experience working with students, they're, you know, if they're struggling academically, coming home for the holidays is dreadful for them, and we hear all about it. Right? Or if they're thinking about changing a major, we are actually coaching students on how to have those conversations because they're so nervous, right? And so if your student comes home and maybe they're struggling in courses or struggling with building community on campus, just asking them, like, what is it that you're missing? You know, what's making you feel this way, and actively listening and just encouraging them to utilize the resources, their academic advisor, to try to come to some conclusions on some of the changes and decisions that they have to make. Also, this is a very big one, and there is actually a lot of research that supports that students who actively and early talk to their faculty and use campus resources they actually perform at a much higher rate. Oftentimes there is a stigma attached to seeking out help, tutoring, talking to faculty in college, and I tell my students this all the time. In college, you want to do that early. You want to build relationships with your faculty, because at the end of the semester, that could mean the difference in a C and a B minus, right? That could mean the difference in a letter of recommendation for grad school or not having one, right? And it's the same thing with campus resources. It builds really this tribe, this support network around the student, so that they always are known by name and story, is how I like to say it. Somebody on this campus, when they're building those relationships and talking, they're going to notice when the student isn't present. They are going to know them and say, hey, I haven't seen this student for a while. And so just to encourage them, you know, they'll find their place, but encourage them to reach out to faculty and use some of the resources. Also, kind of along the same lines, reminding them to be proactive. I mean, Casey talked about how to prepare for advising appointments, starting to look at coursework early and map out if they have a campus job and they need to have a certain schedule. Those things are all going to be really important in taking the initiative to make sure they have a plan of action in place as they navigate from semester to semester. And then I would say you all are here and taking the first step in supporting your student. Share your experiences, right? Share experiences, normalize. It's okay to struggle. College is that safe place, that low stakes place where they can make mistakes. They can learn how to deal with challenges and struggle and relationships. Share with them what you've done to manage challenges throughout your life, how you made big decisions, and how you're just in general learn to manage adulthood. Your students look up to you, and for some of them, you're untouchable. They don't believe that you made any mistakes. So share with them about that one time, whatever that one time is for you, so that they know you were human and you had to learn and you had to struggle, but you made it through, and share some tips with them on how you did that. Again, not exhaustive, but some of the more common ones we've seen as we've worked with students and talked to our advising colleagues across campus. I think that was all we had for you tonight. Casey, is there anything that you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add, in terms of empowering students and encouraging students to be proactive, our Learning Commons has a few different resources, such as academic coaching. So when we talk about having them prepare and map out, there's actual like tutoring sessions that can teach students how to do this, because I think sometimes students, you know, they're not sure, what do you mean I have to map out things? Or what do you there are actual services on our campus that help students work through developing a system, finding, you know, the right resources on campus, all of that. So Learning Commons is something that it's also peer-to-peer. So it's, you know, somebody like them that's just a few steps ahead that can help them figure out the best system for them. So, you know, sometimes as parents, we're not sure, you know, this is how we did it, but maybe it was different time frame and different systems. So there are peers on campus that can help. So encouraging them to seek those out. And also when I was in the Learning Commons, most of the students using those services, they were looking for that A and B. So these are not students that are struggling often. So remind your students, hey, that's where students go to make sure that they're acing the class. You know, it's not a stigma to go to tutoring. All right. So that's what we have there. Are there any questions, Diamond or Whitney, that were in the... All right. See a couple.
Yes, all right, we do have just a few that came in.
Okay.
This one, I believe they're asking if, like you all said, their parents are welcome to join the advisor appointment if the student is okay with that. They're saying, can the parents join that remotely?
So typically we refer to a student and it is their advising appointment. So if they would, you know, invite a parent, but we would encourage the student to try to prepare for that and, you know, come to that on their own if possible, because that is a good learning experience. They're in good hands. Advisors are very friendly people. I love going to advising conferences because it's just a bunch of friendly people. So we would encourage them to try to go on their own, but maybe to prep for that. But definitely a conversation to have with your student.
Okay, another one, they said, do parents have access to all of the technology platforms that you spoke of? Not really sure, but that's the question.
Those would only be accessible to the student and the student's login information. So something like My Bearcat Network is just a student system. The Catalyst, that might be if they have delegated access, there might be some access there. Canvas would also be student only.
Okay, can we expect the students to meet in person each semester with their advisor and sign off on 8 semester plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So advisors actually give students the option of meeting face-to-face or virtually for their academic advising appointments. We don't necessarily mandate. Now, there may be some colleges that have maybe group advising to communicate specific information, and even that may or may not be virtual or a face-to-face appointment. But to your question of the 8 semester plans, yes. So many of our colleges are building that into their first year experience. And so it's actually an assignment that students work on throughout their first year. And so once that is submitted, their academic advisor will actually review that, and that actually gets reviewed every semester, because what's on the 8 semester plan may change. They may decide on a different course. They learned about a new class that they're interested in. And so they make the adjustments on the way to make sure that no matter what, they're staying the course towards graduation.
Great. Can you tell me what is a reasonable first course load?
Oh, the question was a reasonable course load?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I answer this in maybe 2 different ways. So there's the minimum, right, which is 12 credit hours minimum to be full-time status. That's really important to know, because one, that triggers if students are receiving any type of financial aid, or maybe there's scholarship requirements that they have, or any type of engagement on campus. Also, if your student is on any type of insurance, maybe they're on your health insurance or your car insurance. Sometimes health and car insurances require students to be full-time status and to certify that. And so that's another reason why they need to at least be in 12. The second way I'll answer that question is, I would say 15 to 16 hours is average. 15 is at least 15 is good to keep them on track for graduating roughly in 8 years, not 8 years, family, not 8 years. In 4 years, with the exception of if someone's doing a co-op.
Yep.
Now, that being said, I often recommend that students that are heavy into the sciences do 16, because that way, if they're in some sort of lab that's 4 credit hours, or they need to drop a 4 credit hour class fully, that still keeps them at full-time status. So I would say minimum 12, ideally 15 to 16.
Yeah, we always say 15 to finish to get to that timeline to graduation. So
Does pre-professional advising apply, or is it available to architect students for grad school?
I'm not sure grad school program, that'd be one we'd have to ask. Pre-professional advising is available to any student looking at graduate school or professional school. I'm not sure, it's usually more law school related or healthcare related, so med school or pharmacy or, one of those. I'm not sure, but if they're in architecture, it would be a good question to ask their academic advisor if there's any support within DAP, which is the college that architecture is housed in, to see if there's any faculty or advising support for applying to graduate programs.
Okay, this one may be kind of a little challenging, to answer without having specific details, but it says their daughter has more success in person classes and they have to take one online class. Is that correct?
It would depend on the major and what the offerings are. So some courses do only have online options, but again, without knowing more about that, but that would be something to express to the advisor to see if there are any in-person options, maybe whether it's this semester or next semester, just to see what the availability is. But sometimes there are courses that are solely online. So that is a possibility, but it shouldn't be for an on-campus program, the majority. It should be an exception, not the rule. I also have a couple of questions in here. So if you don't get to those, Diamond,
Yeah.
I don't know if they got sent to you or not, but do you want me to go ahead with those?
Yes.
I think we did cover that in person. How far in advance of the advisor appointment does a student need to take the math placement test? So I would try to do that at least 48 hours, if not 72 hours in advance of that advising appointment, just to make sure everything's in there. It's been put into the system. The advisor can see it, all of that. Just to make sure that everything's in there. So yes, definitely, I would say at least 48 hours in advance of that advising appointment. I think that was the only other one that we didn't cover, Diamond.
Their primary advisor will generally check the day before an appointment. And so the 48-hour rule is good to give it time to process and go through and show up in enough time for the advisor to see it 24 hours in advance.
Yep. We want to prepare as much as possible. So we know how to, talk to you about where that puts a student and what that means for their curriculum. So that's why we really want to have that in advance so that we can do the best planning for that student appointment.
This one says if their student has no idea what to major in, are there any strategies or resources to help them narrow things down?
There's a whole department for that. I used to be in that department, exploratory studies. So exploratory studies exists on campus for exactly that reason. So as I mentioned before, students coming in are often unsure, and some don't even have a few things they're thinking about. They're completely openly exploring is what we say. So if they're an openly exploring student, exploratory studies exists and also offers a class that is called Discovering UC. And that's where they bring in all the majors around campus. They help them do assessments to look at their values, their interests, their strengths, all of that. And they're working with an advisor to find their best fit major. And they're also scheduling classes that help them kind of taste test different majors. So that's the other nice thing about exploratory is they're working with that advisor to make sure that their classes they're scheduling classes that will count the most, so to speak, throughout different disciplines that they're interested in. So as I said, there's a whole department for that to help students. And we would definitely recommend if a student is openly exploring, because that actually might save them time to do that research on the front end than to go into something in a year or two from now, decide it's not a good fit. So definitely would recommend exploratory studies. You're in very good hands over there.
Awesome. That's the last question that I have currently in the chat.
I've got one that just came in. Do students have the same academic advisor for all 4 years? That is depending on what their major is, where they are, if they're in the same college. It really depends on where they're at and if they stay in the same place. If a student switches majors, then they would also switch advisors. That the goal would be for them to have the same advisor, but we also have to think about staffing and that kind of thing too. So the goal would be if they're in the same major, same college, that they would stay with that advisor. But depending on, you know, the staffing, that could differ.
Those are all the questions that I have. I do appreciate all you all's time tonight. Leah and Casey, thank you so much for partnering with our office and just continuing to support us and being able to provide these resources and information to our families. We just thank you for, you know, being available tonight and for, you know, just listening to us. We will have this available on our website, like in the next couple days to a week. We'll have it available for you all to reference and refer to later. I would also like to just ask you to save the date for Family Weekend, which is October 20th to the 22nd. We just currently have, you know, just information about that online, but we do have like last year's schedule on there. You can already go ahead and book your hotels and things of that nature. Registration isn't currently open, but we do actually just save the date, you know, and go ahead and mark that on your calendars so that you can plan for that. And you can reach out to us anytime. Our email address is families@uc.edu. And our telephone number is 513-556-1200. Again, we thank you so much for joining tonight, and you all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.